Hello, MavMind Collective, and welcome to another episode of the HypnoSellers Show. Today, we're going to be talking about sameness versus differences. Okay, so the reason I want to talk about sameness versus differences is because this is what's known as a personal preference. It's one of many different personal preferences that we all have, and it helps to align your communication with another person if you understand this personal preference and if you can figure out and determine what that other person's personal preference is when it comes to either being a sameness, what's known as a sameness person, or a differences person. So I use it to build rapport very quickly, and it's one of the more useful ones, so that's why I'm sharing it. And it goes along with some of the other personal preference videos that I've created on this channel. So how would I know if someone's a sameness versus a difference person? Well, to demonstrate that, I'm going to draw something here, and I want you to just watch what I draw, and I want you to think, when I ask you a question, I want you to think about what your answer would be, okay? So I'm just simply going to ask you to describe the relationship between these objects. Just describe the relationship to yourself between these objects. How would you describe it? Right? How would you do that? Some of you would say they're all circles. In fact, some of you watching right now are saying that to yourself. Well, they're all circles. They're all round. They have white in the middle, and they're drawn in a black line. Okay? Some of you are looking at this, and you would describe it as, well, they're all different shapes, or the first two are kind of the same, but there's one that's a little different shape over here. There's one here that looks like it goes all around and connects, whereas this one has an overhanging line hanging over here, and this one has a crisscrossing edge where two edges are crisscrossing like that. And then the first group of people would be saying they're all on the line. If I drew a line, they're all on the same line. And the second group of people would say that this one's higher and then these are lower. So there's two lines, one that's at this height and one that's at this height. In other words, there's different heights. Believe it or not, if you're seeing one set of this way of describing it and you think about the other and listen to the other way I'm describing it, you're like, why would somebody describe it that way? Well, because there's same and different ways to describe it. You can describe the similarities of the objects, or you can describe the differences between the objects, either one or the other. And most of us can usually, when if it's given to us, and we're told to describe the differences or the similarities, we can do it. But the way I asked it was describe the relationship between these objects. So I left it open for you to interpret what I meant by relationship. So either you chose to describe the similarities or you chose to describe the differences in your mind, because that was the relationship that you preferred. That was your first instinct, was to go towards either one or the other. And that's what I mean by personal preference. You had a personal preference for either describing the similarities or the differences. Now, there's different reasons for this. Sometimes you might be wanting to describe the differences because you assume that I already see the similarities, so you might want to point out the differences to me, and vice versa. Maybe you know I see the differences, but you would like to point out the similarities to me. Typically, that's what our subconscious is doing. We choose what we think the other person really wants from us based on what we think is already happening, maybe even in their mind, the way they're modeling it. So this is a really good technique. If you just go draw these circles like this for other people and ask, 5 or 10 people to describe the relationship between the objects, and you'll get about half of them describing the similarities and the other half describing the differences. Now, there's one other phenomena that happens when you ask this question with shapes like this, or any other kind of question. I'll give you some other examples later in this video, in this podcast. But if you ask someone to describe the relationship, sometimes they'll give you a difference first, and then they'll give you a similarity second, and then they'll give you another difference third, and they'll give another similarity fourth, or vice versa. They'll start out with a similarity and a difference, and a similarity and a difference. In other words, they'll toggle, what I call toggling, between both of them, similarities and differences. And this is what I would describe as having a 50-50 relationship. So with the sameness versus differences, you're kind of balancing out the relationship between these two things, the two ideas. And as soon as you give one, then you have to give the other to kind of balance it out. Okay, so it's a 50-50. And so I ask this question a lot of people to see if they're 50-50 or if they just only to give me the similarities or only give me the differences, and I can learn a lot about it. Now, you may not want to draw circles for your client because that might be weird, right? To draw these circles and then say, hey, before we talk about business, I want you to like look at these shapes and describe the relationships. You know, you're not going to do that. So what you can do instead is you can ask, hey, so how would you describe the relationship between the job you have now and the job you had before this one? You could do it like that, because everybody you talk to probably had a job before the one they have now. So you can ask them to describe the relationship between the two. And it turns out to be a really good interview question. If you're interviewing candidates for a role within your company, you can also ask them that question and see if there are differences or a sameness person by the way they describe the relationship between the two jobs. They'll tell you how they're both similar or how they're both different. And you'll be able to key in on that. And then you'll know their preference. Now, why do I want to know the preference? Well, here's why. And first I need to erase this. So with the magic of editing, I'm going to erase this and put a list here. Hold on a second. All right, so I have the list here, and I'm going to talk about these in order. So if I'm a sameness person, I'm typically going to be very strategic. I'm going to approach things in a very strategic way. I'm going to have a higher level view, 30,000 foot view, big picture type of person, thinking bigger picture. How does everything relate? How is everything kind of the same? Because at that high level, typically things tend to be more of the same, and you're just trying to figure out what they have in common, versus being more tactical. If you're a differences person, you're going to be looking for differences, and you're more tactical, you're going to be more detail oriented, looking for details. You're looking for new ways to do things, versus if you're a sameness person, you typically want to just get back to doing it how you did it before. Do it the old way. How we have always done it. Like, why should we change? It's just do it the same way we've always done it. Do it the old way. Also, sameness people tend to be process oriented. They're looking for the process and the steps because they want to repeat and do it the same way over and over again. So they want some structure and some steps, and they want to know what that process is, versus someone that's a differences person is going to be more of a problem solver. So it's never been done before. They don't know why it's not working. Someone's got to figure it out. So they have to take two things. Typically when you problem solve, even like developers, for example, when they problem solve, they take two pieces of code and they put it on a split screen in a program, an application called a diff program. It's called a diff because it shows them side by side the lines, and they can see the differences between one set of code and the other set of code, and they can easily spot where something's different, and then that helps them to solve the problem. So typically the more technical people, in general, not always in every case, but generally if you're more technical oriented, you're going to be more tactically oriented, you're going to be more detail oriented, looking at the more deep dive down into the details and trying to solve the problem and trying to figure out how things work. You're going to be a little bit more technical as your preference in your skill set typically. Versus if you're not as technical, if you're more business oriented, you're going to tend to be more sameness, more strategic, high level, process oriented, bigger picture. How is everything the same? What are all the similarities of things? Versus the technical people tend to be a bit more different as people. And so in general, you could say that salespeople salespeople are more sameness type of people. They want to do the same process over and over again. Once they learn it, they don't want to have to think about solving new problems or doing something in a new, fresh way. They just want to do it the way they always did because they want to be consistent in adding to their pipeline and getting the client to the next stage, to negotiating the same way and negotiating on the same terms and closing the same way, and always keeping things consistent because their livelihood depends on that pipeline being consistently filled and closing things on a consistent basis with consistent metrics, same metrics as before. And they don't really like it whenever their quota goes up or their territory gets changed. It's different than last year. They don't like that. They want to keep it the same. Versus SEs, sales engineers, and professional services that are more technical typically are more tactical. They don't want to do the same thing all the time. They're looking for new problems to solve. They want to figure out a way to innovate a new way to do it that's maybe more efficient than before. And they want to solve new problems as they're going about it. And they don't really care about the process. They don't want to do the same thing with the same process all the time. It's like they pull their hair out sometimes whenever they're told they have to do the same demo over and over and over again. They want to come up with a new demo. They want to come up with a better demo. It's always about improving and getting into details, etc. So again, I'm not saying that this is for everybody, and this is true for everybody, but I mean, because there are some salespeople that are very tactical and very much problem solvers, just as much as there are a lot of SEs and sales engineers and professional services that are very strategic, very process driven, completely focused on the high viewpoint, 30,000 foot view, and how is everything the same and how can we keep it the same and consistent. So don't assume that SEs or professional services are always differences people. I'm just saying in general, I found that to be true. And if you're one of those types of roles, you probably will be agreeing, most of you will be agreeing with me, but some might not. Some might be, you're asking yourself, I tended to describe those circles you drew just a second ago as being all round and all the, they're all circular and they were all drawn with a black line, for example. That was my first reaction to it. That means you're more of a sameness person. So anyway, this is just one of many different preferences, but I use this to align with my customers, clients, and prospects. Once I know they're a differences person, I tend to point out the differences of things. For example, if they're asking me about my product or they're asking me about a process, I typically will shy away from the process and I'll tell them, well, you can kind of follow the process, but you can also use your gut feel. Kind of do it how you want. Maybe you can come up with a better way. So I know their differences. In their mind, there are differences persons. I'm playing to that side of them that wants to do something new. And I'll give them a step. I'll give them something tactical at a low level. I'll tend to go down a rabbit hole with them strategically because I'm thinking as a sameness person, I want to go the same way with these tactical people down, these differences people down into the rabbit hole and help them come back out because I know that's what's going to build rapport with them and they're going to find that I relate to them because they're differences people, versus if they're a sameness person, I'm typically going to not talk about differences between my product and other products. Instead, I'm going to talk about how my product is very much like all of the other products that they're used to using, and that they should feel comfortable using ours just as much as they use some of the other ones that they're used to using, because we typically follow the same type of way of building our software. We approach the same type of value, bring the same type of ROI that other apps that they have. They're going to get their money back and then some with the value they're going to get out of a product, just like all the other products that they enjoy using and that they use and that they're loyal to. They're going to tend to be loyal with us as well. So in other words, I'm going to frame it as we're the same as some of the other applications you already use and like. To a sameness person. To a differences person, I'm going to point out how we're way better than some of the other things and we're different, and here's why. And I'll point out the differentiator type statements with differences people. So keep this in mind. The sameness people, if you start talking about differentiators, they're probably not going to get rapport with you right away. They're not going to enjoy that as much as if when you talk about the similarities with your product with other products. And then the differences people are not going to really get it when you talk about how it's the same as other things. They're going to really, their ears are going to perk up when you talk about how it's differentiated in the market. So keep that in mind. Keep this preference in mind next time you're talking with your prospects, clients, and customers. And hopefully this will help you when you ask them that question, like I said before, right? Can you describe the relationship between the job you have now and the job you had before? Listen to what they say. And if they talk about how they were the same types of job, both jobs were kind of the same, then you know they're a sameness person. And if they talk about the differences between the two jobs, then you know they lean towards being a differences person. And then you can align your communication with them to either be talking about the differences or talking about the sameness of whatever the topic is. Thank you for watching. I know you find value in these videos, didn't you? So if you, like me, are in a customer-facing role, I'm wondering if you want to watch another video now designed to help you get better at what you do every day. Or not. You don't have to watch another video if you don't want to.